Okay, welcome to Into the Channel podcast, primarily about women's football. Before we hit the pitch, if you enjoy the show or love women's football as much as your boys do, come kick it with us already. Subscribe, follow YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you like to watch or listen. Leave us a review over at your favorite podcast app. Links to all of our socials in the show notes of this episode. I am your host, Dino De Cespedes, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Grant Engel. What is up, man?
Oh, buddy, I'm feeling absolutely fantastic. That was some day of football that we got to watch together. That was pretty entertaining, I would say.
I would say feeling a little golden here in the States, still a little work to do, but, now we're starting to see a little pathway. No draws. So if you're out here trying to find the draw, apologies. It's been W's and L's up and down the slate. And we got a good 6 matches, like you said. I can't wait to get into it. Where do you want to get started?
Well, I mean, there's only one place to get started again. We'll start it with this.
I'm going to join you.
Look at you. Outstanding. Let you go first, please. After you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Sounds great. Working on our manners over here. There we go.
Nice.
Got a little beer spray on the microphone. Hopefully that doesn't cost me money in the future. It's all right, though.
The acoustics were good.
Excellent. Let's start with the US of A. I think they played okay.
I would say so. Big 4-1 win over the Germans. The USA clinch a spot to the knockout stage. And what can I say? That trio up front, Smith, Rodman, and Swanson, I think at this point they need a nickname. That's kind of been a little bit of my own personal crusade here. I wasn't able to come up with anything good. I've got a couple options here, so I want to hear what you think. Let me know what you think about Soph, Wind, and Fire.
Okay. Good. Off to a good start right off the bat.
Yeah, I figure maybe Trinity's Fire, Swanson's Wind. I see some parallels there. That kind of feels right.
Okay.
And the only other one I've got is Belle Biv de Gaulle.
Oh, come on. I mean, I really like that one, obviously.
All right, so the challenge has been laid. Anybody watching the show, please tweet at us. We definitely need a name for these 3 players. I feel like this is going to be an era. I feel like this is going to be maybe multiple Olympics, multiple World Cups of these 3 players just up front, devastating teams. And I think we saw it against this German side. So I don't know. I think we can all kind of come together as a community, see if we can come up with something a little bit better than my sort of lame, 90s R&B inspired nicknames here.
I mean, Belle Biv de Gaulle, come on, man. Every time they score a goal, poison. I mean, come on, man. Like, what are we doing? Like, that's incredible. I mean, holy crap. Shout to you. I love it. But yeah, we'll lay down the challenge to anybody else. But I think you're off to a good start. It's a high bar for friends of the program to try to beat. So good job out of you.
I appreciate that. What'd you see in this one?
Okay. All right. Yeah. Enough about that sweet nickname. The big 3, they're a complete nightmare. I just want to start with, if you were to create a right wing in a laboratory, I would want that player to be able to cross and pass the ball at speed. I would want them to have the courage and the skill to take on any defender 1v1. And I would want them to have the mental toughness and the fortitude and the unselfishness to track back and play defense. And that's Trinity Rodman. She is the absolute perfect right wing player to have on your squad. And she completely bossed that game. I know Smith had the brace, obviously Swanson, and then later Lynn Williams. We'll talk about that.
Let's go.
But so much of the action was being dictated by Trinity Rodman. Her connectivity with Rose Lavelle especially was just cooking Germany's defense.
Yeah, I mean, their interplay, I think, kicked off the sequence for the first goal. It was like Rodman, Lavelle, Rodman, and then just Rodman darting up the right side. Swanson, couple slick dummies on back-to-back plays, and I think the second one ends up turning into the goal.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, got to also mention Lindsey Horan, 2 assists on the tournament, leads the entire field. Played great again in this one. Lindsey Horan kind of finding her spot amongst those 3 attackers and just sort of being like, hey, I'm here. Like, I'm ready to ping the ball wherever it needs to go. And then Lavelle just kind of like darting in and darting across from sort of everywhere. She's such a wild card, and she's just not afraid to kind of like advance and put the ball into play into dangerous areas. I think it's like a really cool balance amongst those 5.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And then you have the defensive smarts of Haran and Coffee.
Mhm.
And then the back line. I mean, we're going to end up talking about pretty much every player, but when you have Dunn and Fox on the wings, and then in between them, you have Davidson and Germa. Germa was an absolute brick wall in this match. Just stopping everything. Crystal Dunn had a couple moments where she's just taking the ball off Julia Brand, like just taking it from her. I put in my notes, it's going to be interesting to see going forward. Jenna Neiswanger is not like an up-and-coming player. Mm-hmm. She is a certified excellent player, a star in NWSL. I don't know if you can talk yourself into starting her over Crystal Dunn right now. And I think there's a larger conversation to be had. You know, I love this kind of talk. From her performance in the 2019 World Cup and Crystal Dunn's willingness to basically cost herself dozens, if not 100 international goals and say, okay, yeah, I will go play on the back line and then be excellent at it. Mm-hmm. She will have a place in the conversation, whatever the number is, 10, 20, 25 of the most important players in the history of the program. Wow. This is a pretty good program to be in that place. I just think you can't understate how valuable she is as, okay, she could be a goal scorer. She could be player out on the wing as an attacking player, but she allows herself to go play in the defense, be awesome at it, and then she's able to turn defense into offense. You just can't say enough about her.
Yeah, totally agree. It's been great seeing Dunn play this well. And I think just the whole defense, you called out Germa. Germa is some kind of combination of like a brick wall and a force field and an all-pro free safety. I don't know, Sean Taylor, like a prime Sean Taylor, just out there defending, just making it impossible. A couple times she was the last line of defense, and it was just like, it looked like the lightest of work for her. No full stretch, like full, oh my God, I knock it off track with my shoelace. Like, no, she was just like, okay, yeah, it's just me. All right, I got it. And it didn't matter who it was, Brand, Schuler, Boole, Germa was just up for all of it. Incredible performance from her. Tierna Davidson, on the other hand, leaves with a little bit of an injury. I don't think we know anything yet. Emily Sonnet steps in for her. Looked really good, obviously. She's just, rock solid as well. Unfortunately, though, we're so early in the tournament, and who I think of, I think Crystal Dunn and Emily Sonnet are sort of the Swiss Army knives of this, U.S. men's national team. And if Davidson's going to be out for an extended period of time, that means you've got to go to one of those, probably Sonnet, as more of a full-time player. And it just takes away a little bit of versatility, a little bit of flexibility.
I mean, it does take a little bit away from the general versatility, because now you can't bring Sonnet in at like 60 minutes to spell whoever you might want to choose. Mm-hmm. But you could do a lot worse when you need to replace Tierna Davidson. So you're lucky that you have her. But yeah, it's a really good call out that it limits your options a little bit. But obviously, you want Davidson to be okay, just in general, and as any sports fan would. I don't think it's anything, and I don't think you're saying this either, but I don't think it's anything to hit the panic button about.
Definitely hope not. That's something we'll definitely keep an eye on. Also want to give Alyssa Nair a shout out. So over these two matches, she's faced 9 shots on target, only giving up the 1 goal, which was a screamer from Julie Gwynn on that German side. And I think, if you're Germany, I think you got to be a little bit disappointed, maybe in this one specifically, looking at those 3 players, Clara Boole, Leah Schuler, and Julia Brand, just not being able to break all the way through. That the score ends up coming from a Gwynn strike from real distance, and on a play where I think Coffee fouls Alex Pop a good distance away from goal, and the classic, play the advantage. Defenders kind of slow up for a bit, kind of look around. Everybody's like, all right, are we playing? Are we not playing? And that's enough for Gwynn to just smash it, and then that catches Nair a little bit of sleep. But yeah, just to have given up the 1 goal, 9 shots on target faced, hard to do much better than that.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think Nair a little bit not expecting that, but I mean, it was an incredible angle on the shot from Gwynn. It goes through. I think Davidson tries to make the block, but it goes through her legs. So like Nair reacts like a little late in like a couple different ways. But I mean, as good of a shot as you could take, low to the ground, kind of skipping in there. Just a lot of factors in there to make it great for Gwynn. Yeah, and I think Schuler and Boole, I thought they had a couple chances that they could have finished. Like in my live game notes, I was like, it could have been 3-2 at one point. I mean, there's the one where the ball's kind of bouncing around. It looked like Schuler was going to have a tap in, and then Trinity Rodman again. Like speaking of her tracking back on defense, she's down and she positions her body to kind of shield the ball. I think Davidson had the first block. Rodman shields it and then gets it out of there. It's just they did everything right. That was
Mhm.
Maybe they didn't do everything right, but they did so much right. It should make other teams fearful to be like, well, damn, are they going to have other games where they do even more things right?
I mean, everything right is, I think, pretty close to on the money. I pulled some stats on this U.S. team. So they're second in the field in possession. They're holding the ball 66% of the time across these two matches. 18 and a half shots per game. They're averaging first in the tournament, 7.5 shots on target. That's nasty. Imagine facing those three players. I tried to come up with a comp for Swanson, Smith, and Rodman. Like, who do they remind me of? Like, even going cross sport. And I landed on, it would be like playing a basketball team that had Giannis, and Giannis.
Yeah, that's about right.
Like, it's like, okay. Like, the thing is, like, they can all pass. They can all run. They can all sort of like nudge. They're fast. They're quick also. Sophie Smith had a couple bursts of speed where I'm just like, oh my God, like, you forget that in a short distance, she's just lightning. She doesn't have like, I don't think that the straight ahead top end speed, or maybe she does. She doesn't, totally show it all the time. But from a quickness standpoint, when she wants to go, it's just like, she looks like a wide receiver, running a route against a linebacker. Like a lot of the time, it's just like no chance when she's off and running. One last stat here. So US leads the field in this stat as well. They are scoring a goal every 5.3 shots they take.
Okay.
So
that's pretty good.
When you're putting out 18 and a half per match on average, that's going to result in a ton of goals. And I think, we're definitely seeing it, with the naked eye. We're seeing it playing out on the field, and the stats absolutely back it up.
I love that you gave the possession stats. And now I know it comes with the caveat that they played Zambia in the first match, and Zambia's game is not really ball control.
Down a player,
as we'll discuss. Down a player for 60 minutes. And as we will discuss later, Zambia, they will give up goals. They will give up shot attempts. But Germany looked awesome against Australia in the first match. And USA just came out there and blasted them. Mm-hmm. We were already in the spin cycle of being like, well, Germany didn't look that good in the Euro qualifiers. Oh, Germany's back. Never write off Germany. And I maintain never write off Germany. But Germany looked like a team that had to get everything right in order to beat USA. And that's not typically how a German football side looks. Like, usually they're able to have a measure of control and kind of dictate some of the terms. And they just weren't able to do much of any of that.
Yeah, they're actually struggling. Like, I think both of their matches, stats wise, they're putting just 34.5% of their shots on target, which is definitely near the bottom of the field. So 34.5. The leader in the category is France at 52. So it's a huge gap between those two. And there's three more teams that are over 40. 34.5. That's a tough go.
Yeah.
Julie Foudy had a lot to say too about Alex Pop playing in the midfield, not being in an attacking position. To me, that wasn't the problem. It wasn't the problem that they didn't have Pop in an attacking position. The problem was that they had Pop in the midfield. And she had a hell of a time like connecting passes against this U.S. defense. Coffee, Haran, those other players that you mentioned, they just made it really tough on her. And I kind of feel like maybe Pop's confidence started to get derailed a little bit. Because, I mean, she was missing on some easy stuff as the match went on. And then you look at that defense, Catherine Henrik, like she misplays a clearance, gets swiped by Sophie Smith, who wins the 30-70 ball. Yeah. And that becomes the Swanson putback. Not quite Germany's day, nowhere near, how good they could play, but they were definitely, I think, way off the mark today.
That's fair to say. So, we'll continue to maintain our never write off Germany ethos, but it'll be interesting to see the next big squad that Germany comes up against. Assuming that they're going to make the knockout stage. I think that's probably a pretty safe bet. They have Zambia next. But we'll see how that goes. But once they get into the knockout round, it's like a guarantee they're going to face another giant out there. I think I'll be very interested to see how that looks for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're actually in second place in the group. They still have a 2-goal differential advantage over Australia. So they could be kind of locked into that second place, and they get to face Zambia. Australia's got to take on the USA. So I think they'll get a somewhat favorable draw in the knockout stage. But I think either way, if they don't get those three attacking players on track, I think it's a one and done once they hit the knockout stage. And lastly, Lena Oberdorf, like you definitely missed her in this one.
Yeah.
You got to imagine that she would have made things a little bit more difficult for that U.S. attack.
Yeah, of course. That's a great call. Not to take anything away from Brand, Boole, and Schuler, but the other trouble with having Pop in the midfield is now you don't have Alex Pop to score goals up front. So like Pop can't pass to herself up there. And her finishing touch, obviously that goes without saying. So we knew it when it happened. The Oberdorf injury is just massive for them, but they still have a lot of skill out there. So I'll be very excited to see how it looks against Zambia. And then you're probably right. I mean, against one of the other giants, if we look at it, so okay, let's say they finish second in Group B, then they will take on second in Group A. So it might be France, it might be Colombia, it might be Canada, might be New Zealand. It won't be New Zealand, but it might be Colombia, it might be France, or it might be Canada.
Yeah, I think that's a tough matchup against either of those teams. And I think, for those unfamiliar with Oberdorf's game, it would be akin to losing Gurma right before the tournament. It's just such a centerpiece type player. It's just going to be tough. I mean, their ceiling probably maybe winning a knockout game. Sure. But like you said, they got to definitely got to get things on track. In not quite a must win, but a must result for sure. Germany takes on Zambia, who just came off, I don't know, absolute barn burner against Australia. I don't even know where to get started. Where do we get started when a match notches, 11 goals?
No defense necessary, my good man. That was optional today. Yeah, I mean, forwards or any attacking player you could imagine, just largely running free. The back lines were employing these interesting techniques of overshading way to one side, creating massive passing lanes, not marking players on set pieces. And it turns out a lot of players between Australia and Zambia are capable of scoring goals in those situations. I mean, we could play a game of which of the 11 goals was your favorite, and you get to pick whatever reason it was your favorite. And then we could do which of the 11 goals was our least favorite, and then give our reasoning for that if you're interested in a mini game here within the show.
100% interested in the mini game here. I'm going to go with my least favorite just because I just felt bad for this player. Yeah. So Australia's first goal, the Alana Kennedy goal, Zambia defender, Lushoma Mwemba, doesn't get the memo that Zambia is going to try to hold the line here. And what ends up happening, I think it's a Steph Catley free kick over the top. She plays all 5 Tilly attackers onside with no chance of defending. Like literally, like 3 or 4 Matildas could have knocked that one in. Like as soon as the ball kind of like leaves Catley's foot, I'm like, oh, that's definitely a goal. Okay, there's the lead. So such an absolute whiff defensively. And that was just the tip of the iceberg, really. But I think Mwemba was just so singled out trying to run alongside 5 Tilly attackers. Just a tough look. I didn't like the feel of that one.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And that's one of those situations where, I mentioned it briefly after match day 1. Zambia's goalkeeper, Musole, she had a pretty rough go of it in the first match. And she was not without a few mistakes in this match too. But that's a real bummer for her. That goal is absolutely 1,000,000,000% not on her. Like she is completely exposed in that situation. So I will say my least favorite, let's call it the own goal that gets called against Musole. So a free kick hits the crossbar, which everything was bouncing off the crossbar, off the post. Chaos ensues, and then it's Mwembe again. And Mwembe tries to clear the ball off the line and kicks it right off Musole's back into the goal for an own goal at 58. And that was the first of the 4 unanswered goals. And I'm not going to pretend like I was like, oh man, it's happening now, because they only had cut it to 5-3. But I was like, the radar was a little peaked. I was like, okay, if maybe Bonda gets her 4th and ices this away, but I don't like the look of that. And I didn't like the look of any of the players after it happened. But obviously you give up a kind of a cruddy own goal like that. I don't expect anybody's body language to be great after that moment.
This game was fraught with highs and lows for sure. And I think the first high starts just seconds into the game. Probably my favorite goal, the Bonda worldie,
come on.
The audacity of it, but then also even though it was a wild goal, like if you give her that look, it's 8.5 out of 10. Yep. She's just sticking it. She's like, this happens to be my spot. This happens to be my situation. And she was like looking for it too. It's not one of these sort of panic hacks at it. She was like, I think she was ready for that opening and took it right off the bat. And you can kind of see a little bit of the tension and a little bit of maybe the pressure of kind of carrying, a little bit of the football nation, on her back released there. And then I think you saw pretty much that whole Zambian attack, for better or worse, really get loose. And I think maybe the defense maybe a little too loose as the game wore on.
Perhaps. I'll follow your lead on that. I think Benda's second goal, Mackenzie Arnold's punch, not nearly strong enough. But what made me laugh about it, you obviously feel for Arnold in this situation. But imagine you punch for the clearance, and then you just see it land at Barbara Benda's feet, and you're like, I mean, okay. So that's obviously only ending one way.
Yeah. Nightmare situation to find yourself in. Credit to Australia, though. They pull it out. You mentioned those 4 unanswered goals to pretty much save their tournament. Zambia not mathematically eliminated, but Australia right up in the mix now, a -2 goal differential, 3 big points. And like we mentioned, there hasn't been any draws yet in the tournament. So everybody's either on 0 or 3 or 6. Zoom out, you've got 8 teams that are at 3 points or above.
That's amazing.
So, 8 are going to go through. And I think and the one wild card there, which we'll get into, is Canada, who's on 0 points, but has won both their matches. So, they've got a really solid goal differential. And with a win, like they might leapfrog some of these teams. So if you get stuck on 3, Canada is there to leapfrog you.
Yeah.
So huge result here for Australia.
Yeah, massive. Like you said, it saves their tournament. Okay, so let's do this thought exercise then. Australia, they just don't have enough to beat USA. Maybe you get a Croy Bethune goal. Hint, hint, Emma, put Croy Bethune in the match. I don't know, maybe. Maybe Bethune has a great assist to one of your great strikers. I don't know.
That'd be nice.
Maybe put her in the game. But I digress. USA wins. Australia, they remain on 3 points, and now their goal differential, let's just call it -3. And Canada gets a win. And now Canada has 3 points and a +3 goal differential. And they move on over Australia. How mad are those Australians going to be that the team with the big cloud of the drone scandal and the spying scandal goes on ahead of them? I'll save my Canada thoughts for when we talk about them and like how much of a big deal I think it is, or like, I don't know, however we want to talk about it, but they're going to be furious if that happens.
Yeah, it's a little weird because FIFA makes the 6-point deduction, and then it's kind of like, I don't know, does double jeopardy apply here? Can they go back and re-punish them for something?
Right.
Or apply another layer of punishment on top of that?
Mm-hmm.
I only really have one thought on this Canada situation. And it's basically this. Let's all stop with the narrative of like, oh, the players didn't do this, and why should the players be punished? And the players, and there's somebody else in it. It's like, this is an organization thing. It would be a travesty for those players to get punished. But this is at the organizational level. Like Canada football is the players plus the whole infrastructure. It's like the selection of players, it's the strategy stuff, the tactical stuff. All of it is part of one organization. You kind of win as an organization, even though the players, I think, are the only ones that take the home medals. Yeah. It's sort of an extension of the kid glovesy nature of like, look at the girls out there just, having fun for the love of the game. And, it's like, this is just a shitty situation. Some jerks were doing something that they definitely should not have been doing. Totally not above board. And that's the risk you run when you're doing something that nefarious. You might just sink the whole thing, and it's awful for the players, but you have to consider the whole team, the whole infrastructure, the whole organization as one entity, unfortunately.
I think you're spot on. And I'm glad you frame it that way. You kind of open my eyes to a couple things here. So of course, obviously, if you think about Canadian football, you think about Mariam Karabi if She Scores Bangers. Now, she has been covering this extensively, obviously, as you would imagine. She had AC Lang from W Soccer Canada on her last couple shows. And when you talk about like how far back can this go? Is it going to be like double jeopardy? This is the thing that I'm kind of interested in. I realize we're taking a little bit of a detour from what's happening here. But if the reporting is that this drone scandal might go back as far as 2017. And Mariam said it on one of her last 2 podcasts. The 2020 gold medals might be in play here to be revoked. And so I'm trying to remember how it worked with Reggie Bush. I think I have this right. Reggie Bush, American collegiate football player, found guilty of the crime of accepting money as an athlete when he was in college in 2005. Shame on him. Tisk. You got paid for your talents. I believe, if I remember this correctly, when they took away his Heisman, he forfeited the actual trophy back to the NCAA or the Heisman Trust. I think he forfeited it in 2010. Let me tell you something. For the Canadian players, and I hope that they follow this advice, and I'm sure they've already thought about it. I don't know how it works in Canada, but you better be working for an organization that goes by 3 letters if you're coming into my house and taking my gold medal, because you're not invited in. You ain't taking my gold medal. I won that medal on the field, and nobody is. You can tell me it doesn't count. You can tell me I don't get to celebrate anymore. I don't get the parades or the free beers or whatever. That's fine. You ain't taking it out of my house. And I was floored when Reggie Bush gave back the Heisman, because you would have to pry that thing from my cold, dead hands.
I mean, even then, good luck.
Yeah, for real. No, man, I earned that shit.
Yeah, no. I think if you want to strip something away on Wikipedia or something, or
Sure.
FIFA.com or IOC, I don't know, some web archive, do that. But my shit stays in the safe. How about that?
Hell yeah.
Or I'll just be like, oh, maybe I auctioned it off on eBay a couple years ago. Times were tough, need a little scratch, and I don't know.
I ain't got it. Don't come bothering me for it. Yeah, so that's what I say. And
she ain't home.
Yeah, exactly. There's just a lot in play here, and Christine Sinclair, like right after everything drops, she issued a very strong statement that said, I never watched any drone footage at any of my time with the Federation or with the team. So I'm not going to besmirch her character or accuse her of anything. I really hope that's true, because once you get out there with that public statement, and to be fair, I do not have a reason to believe it's not true. I just want to say we've seen really strong denials in the past, and then they kind of come back to bite folks. So if this is, and I want to take Christine Sinclair at her word here, if this was, like you kind of said, like just a few jerks, people with like a lot of arrogance who just thought they could get away with this for years and years. Now they have to wear that. You ruined it for everybody. Now Vanessa Gilles has to have this on her. And that's on the people who are flying the drones, the people who came up with this ridiculous plan, like all that stuff. That's where the majority of the shame should go. I think your point about like infantilizing the players or being like, oh, don't blame them. I don't necessarily blame them, but the penalties are going to be what they are. So I think it's fair that you say it's an organizational penalty, and unfortunately the players are part of the organization. And now we just get to watch our favorite thing in sports, one of our favorite things in sports, everybody picking sides. Because now you're gonna have the rule zealots and the people who are gonna be like, they're cheaters, they're the worst, get them out of here. And then you're gonna have the people who will be like, screw it, win at all costs, do whatever you gotta do. And then we're just gonna get a lot of sports radio conversation out of that. So at least we have that to look forward to.
That's true. And thankfully, this is our show, so we can take our conversation wherever we want it.
Very true.
Speaking of this Canadian team, how about a little Canada 2, France 1? What'd you see in this one?
Yeah, pretty entertaining. I would say France looked really good. Maybe really good is too strong, but they at least looked good in the first half. The build-up play was there. They just couldn't break through. But when they did, 42nd minute, who else could it be? Marie-Antoinette Katoto. Just a display of like 3 quick touches. Exactly what we were talking about in the last show, where she's not operating in a ton of space, but it's just, okay, one, and then she can get the shot off. Gilles goes for the block. It goes between her legs. No real shot for Sheridan to save it. And Katoto has 3 goals in the tournament, tied for that golden boot race, which I don't think there is a golden boot in the Olympics. It doesn't matter. In our hearts, in the ITC record book, there is a golden boot.
Absolutely.
But then shit changed in the second half. France did not look nearly as good. And we always talk about her, the Chelsea Blue herself, Ashley Lawrence, just scaring the crap out of France. Down either wing, right wing, left wing, doesn't matter. Wherever part of the field she's on, you're chasing her because you're not nearly as fast and as athletic as she is.
She's so good. She's like,
it's crazy.
She sort of has the, when you watch like either NASCAR or F1 racing where the cars are like kind of nudging up against each other, and like the driver with the good car and like the good skill always can kind of like maneuver past you and kind of square, and then you're just like, oh, they did it again. Like, it's like, that just seems to be like the Ashley Lawrence corollary. She's just like, when she wants it, doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter how fast you are, where you're at, how well you're positioned. She can just get around you one way or the like. There's just no stopping Ashley Lawrence when she's that determined.
Yeah, that's a great point. And she did exactly that with that determination, with that speed and skill. She serves the cross in. Perrault Magnon tries to get her hands on it. It slips out. Jessie Fleming right there for the toe poke. It's 1-1. I'll just kind of fast forward to the very end. You could just see there was a look on Jessie Fleming's face throughout the match where she was like, yeah, this isn't over yet. We're not going out like this. I think there's a funny shot of her, like those, like, it's like applesauce or like whatever that, like, squeezy, like, whatever it is.
Yeah. The kid loves
I know
those.
Runners take it. There you go. Yeah. I'm sure it was like a go-go squeeze or whatever. I'm sure that's what they're feeding them over there. And yeah, there's just a funny camera shot of her just like devouring the go-go squeeze and like with this real like serious look on her face. They get the other scrappy goal. It's Gilles at the end, which was cool to see because Gilles, she's a hard-nosed defender and she's like always in the mix. So then, like, in that first goal, in the Katoto goal, the ball it's scored and it's through her legs. And you're like, hard break. And we saw it in the CONCACAF Gold Cup. She just gets, like, some hard luck goals because she's just out there defending, strikers. So it was good to see her put that away for the win.
Absolutely. And I'm gonna dust off an old, back in my day when I used to hoop story.
Yes.
So this was a big thing for me. You mentioned before, I'm a tallish guy, 6'3"-ish. In my prime, I could throw it down with the best of the 6'3",
Yes.
bros in that height category. And I never understood the notion of like, getting dunked on. Like for me, I was always going up and trying to contest dunks and like, I didn't really care. And, you get a hand on one and like stop a play or, maybe it's a timely foul, but you can't just let somebody come in and dunk on you.
Yeah.
I think I've been dunked on maybe a couple times in my entire career. One of them, I was in my late 30s and I don't even know I forgot how old I was.
Right.
But I've also made some spectacular defensive plays. And I think Vanessa Gilles is like that kind of player. She just does not care. She's going to be in the mix. She doesn't care. She doesn't care about, did somebody get me on this one? She's just hungry to defend and hungry to win the ball back. And to say that she's not thinking is not fair, but she's so instinctive and so hungry as a player. It's like 0% surprising that, the ball falls to her and she's the one that knocks home the winner.
Yeah. Great way to put it. I think the last couple things I want to touch on are Canada. They keep bringing on Evelyn Viens later in these matches. Yeah. And she just creates chances. I mean, you're just casually bringing on the Serie A Golden Boot winner off the bench. Yeah. And she looks dangerous every single time she's out there. I just felt like France, man, to switch gears back over to them.
Sure.
They just started doing the thing where they just knock the ball around in the last 45. And it's like, can you guys just like, they had a chance near the very death of it. Basha drives the ball down the field and she plays in a nice cross to Gayorio and Gayorio just whiffs it. And I was just like that. And I got love for Grace Gayorio, one of my favorite players for PSG. It's just like, that was probably the one.
I'm ecstatic that you brought up that Basha cross at the death, because I also took note of that play, because if we're talking about the same play, the clock was like well past the allotted time of extra time, right?
Yes.
And France is just like, it's like Karshawi's knocking around, like De Almeida's in there, and I think they're just kind of going back and forth. And like Bosch is like screaming for the ball. And like she gets it, and like in 2 touches, she gets to her Basha spot and she gets off her Basha cross. And like, like she seemed to be the only one late in that match who had like a sense of urgency. Is like, okay, I know that we're France and we play in a very French way, but we need to score. We're losing this match. We cannot lose at home. Like they're at a little bit of risk. I mean, like mathematically it's possible. They could not advance out of the group stage here. So they definitely still need a result.
Yeah.
This loss to Canada really hurts. I mean, I think a draw pretty much ends Canada's run because they would still been in the negative points territory thanks to that points deduction. But now that group totally up for grabs. France on 3 points, Colombia on 3 points, and Canada within striking distance.
Absolutely. I will say, I mean, if France loses, because I think they would have to lose to not make it out of the group stage. If they lose to New Zealand, you already knew Hervé Renard is out anyway. But the whole technical staff is probably looking on LinkedIn for new jobs if they lose to New Zealand at home in the Olympics. So they got to get that done. And even if you draw New Zealand and you make it through, just start brushing up the resume because you're probably not going to be around for much longer, even though you advance out of the group stage.
Yeah, we were talking about this a little bit pre-show. It's funny that these teams are grouped together because Colombia feels like a team that always beats the team that they should beat handily. Yeah. Like it's just like you line them up, knock them down. France, on the other hand, they're happy to engage in these like nip and tuck games with teams that they shouldn't really be like that kind of engaged with. They should obviously wax New Zealand, but there's something in the back of my mind, man. Like, you think back to that 0-0, against Australia in the World Cup, dropped that one in penalties, and France was a heavy favorite in that match against Australia, even though they were on the road playing against the home team. There were just so much more firepower on that France team. Shout out to CO2 Filey. Couldn't have been fun watching that one go down. But the flip side, she was on it.
Yeah, she was right on it. I mean, and we got encouraged from the opener. They played on the front foot versus Colombia. They thought like, okay, we could take these players on attacking wise. And they did that. And now you just get this backslide. And it's just like, what is going on in the culture here where you have just supreme talent on the pitch and you just cannot find a measure of consistency, or like, I like that you point out like the sense of urgency at the end of matches and stuff. Or even it's like, okay, we've been kind of knocking the ball around aimlessly. Now let's get our sense of urgency. It's like, well, we could have used that 35 minutes ago, or, right. Who knows, from the beginning of the match, if I could be so bold. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see your point about Colombia. When they go and they beat up teams that they should beat up, they beat the crap out of New Zealand. I understand it was a 2-0 game. Didn't look like it. Like, they dominated them.
Yeah, totally. No Mayra Ramirez either. I think we got clarity on the red card suspension issue that we were kicking around last week internally. Mm-hmm. So she's out. Pavi takes her place. And yeah, Colombia just muscles New Zealand around the park. And they have a big time match against Canada. That's going to be really interesting. But awesome. Before we get there, I want to talk a little bit about Colombia. Obviously, we've seen a great 90 plus from them against New Zealand. I think we saw them win the second half against France.
Sure.
Is this a team that is kind of rounding into a little bit of shape? I think, Caicedo had a little bit of swagger too in this New Zealand matchup. And I think the attacks were coming from different places. I think that was like another exciting part. It was like, okay, wow, this is a Colombian team that can hurt you a lot of different ways now.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Caicedo was blowing past defenders, and she not only just using her speed, just real clever play. She had like multiple instances where she was getting the New Zealand players off balance and then just tapping the ball out of their path, and they're completely shattered ankles. She's just getting to her spots. The Restrepo goal is, it's falling out of the air. She's like just past the top of the 18, and she has that swooping volley where how many times have you seen it watching any level of football where so many times the player hits that and they have to kind of like really swing their leg around to get to it, and they just hit a pop-up over the goal. Or they get over it and they hit like a ground ball that bounces and it's either blocked or it gets saved. She hit that thing clean, kept it low, kept it on a line, and perfectly on target. Just magnificent skill. So to your point, between Caicedo, Usme, Pavi, Restrepo, Lacey Santos, and now you bring back Mayra Ramirez, that's a lot of skill and a lot of toughness on that side. I mean, we talked about them pre-tournament. This is another one of those teams where you hit it on the head. They dominate the teams that they're going to beat. We just got to see them start to get some big results against some of the other giants in the game.
I think they're going to be up for this Canada matchup.
Oh, I believe it.
Obviously, you know that their DNA, like they're just a super tough out.
Hell yeah.
They pushed England to the absolute limit in the World Cup and played really great the entire tournament leading up to that. Against Canada, this happens quite a bit when there's like real odds stacked against a team. You'll see them kind of like push. You'll see them kind of like, squeeze something out, like grab something that, was really, really tough. And then, sort of just sputter out at the end just because like it took so much work. I mean, like, I don't think anybody was expecting this Canada team to clear this group with 3 wins, a group with France in it, a group with Colombia in it. They've won their first 2. Now, obviously their back's against the wall as well. Their tournament's over with anything except a win. A win probably carries them through based on the goal differential math, but I don't think Colombia is interested in any of that. I think Colombia is interested in being like, okay, like this would be a nice tune-up for us heading into the knockout stage. I really like Colombia to get a result here and not back into the knockout stage, but fully kind of like shake off that 3-2 loss to France to open and really go into the knockout stage with some momentum.
I think it's one of the 2 matches I'm looking forward to the most.
Gotta be.
Colombia and Canada. Yeah, it's must-watch TV. It's give me at noon over here in the Pacific Northwest. Man, Canada, do we have to consider the magic or the sports movie trope of like our backs are against the wall, our leadership let us down, like all the evil suits up top, which, I usually do subscribe to that notion. But like management, they acted like a bunch of dirtbags and we didn't realize this was going on. And now they put us in this bad spot. Can that be the rallying cry? Or are you going to see Ramirez and Caicedo and Santos on the field and be like, whoa, they're really fast. Oh man, they're playing a lot of good passes in between to each other. Man, just so much intrigue in here. And then we would also get the rare 3 victories plus goal differential, 3 points for some reason. So that's an interesting prospect on the board.
For sure. I actually think Canada caught a little bit of a tough break because had they beaten Colombia in the second matchup and then had that third against France, I think I maybe feel differently. Obviously we saw this Canadian team beat France, but there's just something about Colombia where they're not going to give a shit about that story. They're going to be like, we don't care like that you were wronged or that this is, unjust or an injustice or et cetera, et cetera. They're like, we're here to punish you. This is a team. It sort of reminds me a little bit. Tough to say because I mean there's a few similarities, but there's also a few key differences. But in some ways, it does remind me of like the Argentinian men's team, where it's like, damn, the pieces are there. The infrastructure is not there, obviously, but the pieces are there. The play is there. The coaching is there. The spirit is there. It's just a matter of like, okay, when is this team going to start really knocking on the door of the upper echelon teams in the world? And I don't think they're far off, man. I think that they played France super tough. Big win here. Tremendous showing in the World Cup. AAA1 talent, in a couple spots on the pitch. On any given day, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if this team played Spain to a draw and now it's penalty kicks, or beat a Japan or, pushed the USA to the brink. Like this team is like sort of like right there knocking on the door.
I like it. You've been on Colombia from Jump Street, so I'm here supporting you. And I mean, you're obviously right. The talent is too good. I'm with you on that. I think Ashley Lawrence running up against that Colombia defense, I think that's going to be something to really watch for. Evelyn Vienne's kind of, in between the center backs and kind of trying to pick out that space, whether it's the last 30 minutes. I wouldn't be surprised if it's the last 45 minutes, if you're just like, okay, bring her on early, let's go, especially depending on what happens in the first half. Man, absolute banger. Absolute banger. I think it's the one it might be the one I'm most intrigued for. It's one or two. We'll talk about the last group here, and then I can decide.
Let's do that. Group C. So we're almost an hour into the pod, and let's talk about the world champs here. Spain. Mm-hmm. Spain get past Nigeria. Tough continues. One. I know. Can't believe it. 1-0. The champs get past Nigeria, but more importantly, get a big win, clinch their spot in the knockout stage. What'd you see in this one?
I mean, it's another great performance by Spain. Some people might think that Spain is supposed to blow everybody out of the water, but that would be underselling how good Nigeria is. And so because I have so much respect for Nigeria as an organized defense with one of the better keepers in the world, I think you could look at this again and say another fantastic performance by Spain. They hold the ball, they wear you out, and then they have multiple players on the field who can get you that spectacular piece of skill. Most notable among them, or maybe second most notable among them, 2-time Ballon d'Or winner Alexia Putellas.
X gonna give it to you. Mm-hmm. So Spain, you talked about it, 75% possession over their first 2 matches. Fucking crazy.
Come on now.
They're also leading the field in shot attempts, 19.5 per. Their shots on target rate, though, that's kind of where things break down a bit. And I think we've seen that coming into the tournament. We looked at that Caldente, Pariuelo, Hermoso, like kind of attack. And you were like, all right, they're going to need a little something probably from Aitana or Patri or Alexia, as mentioned. Their shot on target rate, though, is bottom 4 in the field, under 36%. And they're taking 13 shots to score a goal. Worst in the field, tied with New Zealand. As a reminder, the USA tops that stat, 5.3 shots to Spain's 13. So Spain's definitely leaving a lot to be desired. What I really liked about this match, I didn't expect this coming into it, but this is how it played out. Like, we got a couple different moments where Alexia and Enedozi go head to head. I think in the first half, there was that one play where Alexia's got like like a stone cold opportunity right in front of goal. Huge save by Inadozie. I think that if I'm remembering this right, the play-by-play announcer was like already proclaimed it the save of the tournament. He was like,
Let's go.
there will
Good
not
for
be
him.
a better
I like
save. I was like, yeah, co-sign me up for that. That's a nice bet. And then 85th minute, obviously we saw the second moment of magic. Alexia beats Inadozie from distance off a free kick. I watched this one on Telemundo. Shout out to the play-by-play announcer who had the following call: España va directo, ¿por qué no? Which is basically a long drawn out, why not? It's incredible.
That's amazing.
I mean, he just was, caught up in the air and just slammed it home. Excellent call on that one.
I love it. Yeah. And you know what? It is one of those, and there's a good tweet going around. We retweeted it from the ITC Twitter account of the back angle from Alexia's shot where you see the curve on it from the distance. And I mean, it's just absolutely unreal. Nothing Inadozie can do about that. I mean, and why not is the exact right way to frame that. It's like, Alexia's got the skill, so why not try it?
Yeah, and what a great way to get her back. And I think I'm glad you mentioned that Nigeria defense, masterful performance from them. Not in defense, but I thought Oshuala was great in this one. Very spirited effort.
Yeah.
A little bit of a chip on her shoulder playing against a lot of her old Barca teammates. Michelle Lozier, who we know from the NWSL, Houston Dashes, Michelle Lozier, she looked very effective. But yeah, they were great on defense. I think they've been great on defense kind of all tournament. So they're allowing a shot on target rate of just 29%. So that means they're crowding shooters. That's second in this tournament behind France. Just a smidge behind France. So like they're really making it tough, even to just get a clean look and just put your shot on target. They're making that difficult. And I gotta mention it. ITC favorite Christy Ucheibe of Benfica gets pulled off the match for Uchenna Kanu late. You got to credit Nigeria and their strategy department for trying to play a little bit aggressive. But the very next action after Ucheibe steps off the field is Alexia burying that winner. Coincidence? Who's to say?
Who is to say? I'm not sure what Ucheibe would have done about that free kick, but your point stands. She put in a full 90 versus Brazil. She puts in 85 minutes against Spain. I mean, she's a talisman-like player out there, kind of keeping everybody organized, helping the ball move around. There's so much to like about Nigeria. We like begrudgingly had to say before the tournament when we did some predictions, it's a bummer to think that both teams from the continent of Africa would not make it through to the knockout round. It seems like that's probably going to happen, which really sucks. But like, you definitely want to see both of these countries put more and more resources in there because you have an assortment of some of the players who, like, Banda is like the best striker in the world. Inadozie is one of the best keepers in the world. Ucheibe is a great holding midfielder, kind of utility midfielder. You have elite players. Let's keep putting the resources in these programs, and then you can start making some knockout rounds, some quarterfinals, maybe a semifinal of a World Cup or something like that. Because you have the talent, and you have, with Nigeria, super intelligent defense too. So they're doing a lot of things right over there.
100% agree. And I think, like, imagine a team, I can't do this obviously, but imagine a team combining Nigeria's defense with Zambia's offense. How scary that team would be, and I think it's just a matter of these teams evolving a little bit. And I'm glad you brought this up because I had this thought about Zambia specifically. So we were excited about them in the World Cup, but they were like the longest of long shots.
Right.
And they looked like Panama or a Philippines or a Vietnam, like they were sort of, in those waters. But in this matchup, they look on the level with Australia. Obviously no Sam Kerr on Australia, but this Australia side is a team that finished fourth in the last World Cup.
Yep.
Ranked in the top 12. And I don't know, to my eyes, Zambia's not too far off. I don't think any of those players left that game thinking like, oh, damn, like we missed a chance to like pull the greatest upset in Zambian history. No, it's like, no, we should have beat that team, or we absolutely should have beat that team, or at the very least, take it to a draw. Like they're very clearly ascending at a speed that I don't think we're noticing, to be honest.
Yeah. Thinking
about this Nigeria side, just to switch gears, kind of tough. They've yet to net a goal in this tournament. So as good as they've been defensively, you have to be able to threaten. You have to be able to finish. I think they're doing fairly well in possession. They're getting chances. They're putting a few shots on target, but they're not really being able to finish at any kind of rate. Really, they're still sitting on zero. But I think these two sides, by the next World Cup cycle, to be honest, you're going to have a Barbara Banda in her prime, or maybe entering her prime. come 3 years from now. I think her and Kunanaji are still both in the 23-year-old kind of range.
Yep.
And I think athletically, it was wild to see Zambia be able to run with that Australia side and like see Ellie Carpenter not be able to catch Mopopo from Zambia, just being like, I don't have anything for this player. And I think the telecast mentioned that I think she's got some Olympics level track and field in her game, Mopopo specifically. But I'm just excited to see the growth of the game on that continent for sure.
100%. You teed me up for this. It turns out the key to beating Zambia in the Olympics, let Barbara Benda score a hat trick, because in the last 2 Olympic tournaments, Benda has 3 hat tricks. Okay, that's insane. Off rip. But the Copper Queens have 0 wins, 1 draw, and 2 losses in those matches. They had the 10-3 loss to Netherlands, where Benda scored all 3. They had the 4-4 draw versus China, also in group play at 2020. And now they have this 6-5 loss to Australia. So if you let Benda get 3 in a match, you might be in good shape in Olympic group play.
Absolutely. And I mentioned last week or maybe the week prior that I wasn't rooting for anything except for USA versus Spain at some point during this tournament. I got to amend that slightly now because I think Nigeria and Zambia both on 0 points. Nigeria yet to score. I'm really rooting for some results for both of these teams heading into their final matchup. Zambia's going to take on Germany. We know the history of those two sides. And Nigeria, they're going to take on Japan. I don't know. Japan, we'll get into them in a second. They're holding the ball about 30.5% of the time over these 2 matches. That's going to be absolutely an opportunity for Nigeria to be able to put something together. But I really want to see both of these African sides get a result, leave this tournament, on a high note. Both these teams absolutely capable of making that happen.
For sure. Yeah, I like that too. Just rooting for them to kind of get out of there. I think, Nigeria, Japan, that's going to be super interesting because the fact is somebody's going to have to play with the ball at their feet. I think Japan and Nigeria, neither of them have cracked better than 50% possession in either of their first 2 games. I think Nigeria was close. I think they had 48% possession in the last match. Or no, maybe in their first match. But yeah, I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see how Japan might be able to break down that really smart defense from the Super Falcons.
Absolutely. Let's talk about Japan. So, I don't know. They were able to put something together late against Brazil. Japan 2, Brazil 1. Real fireworks in this one. Where do you want to get started?
I felt bad for Mina Tanaka. She misses a sitter in the first part of the first half. I jumped up and was like, goal. And it was not a goal. She just shanked it. And I don't want to say I started to get nervous, but I was like, ooh, you don't want to waste those against Brazil because you don't know how many you're going to get with that defense. I thought Brazil, they played physical. They created some looks on set pieces. And then we had the first handball call. Which I don't know. I want to talk about it a little bit. I just felt like the defender wasn't in an unnatural position. They're just trying to play defense. Her arms at her side.
Well, her arms at her side as her arms are working their way back to behind her back.
That's what I'm saying.
This is a player clearly trying to navigate out of the way. And if there's no real advantage, it's just such a weird. I mean, I don't know. I hate doing rules talk, but that's just not what any of us are here to see.
I understand the letter of the law. It's a handball in the box. The spirit, though, to your point, she's trying to pull back. She's just playing defense. Her arms are at her side. It feels like there are a lot of other check marks that shouldn't have been it. But then we got a real ball don't lie moment. I thought I felt bad for Tanaka when she missed the sitter. That was a rare trio of attributes to take a horrendous penalty kick. She telegraphed where it was going. She did not place it anywhere near she wanted to place it, and it had no pace. It was an awful penalty. And credit to Lorena for still, reading it and then kind of realizing all I have to do is fall over to the left and I'll stop this. But that was ugly. And I think the thing that you see it in professional sports sometimes, but it's always a little jarring because, like we always talk about, every great player makes mistakes. You have bad plays out there. You can see players be like, oh shit, what was I thinking right there? That was bad. Mina Tanaka was visibly embarrassed after that PK, and that really sucks to see because she's a great player. But from that effort, I don't blame her for feeling that way.
No, definitely not. Mentioning that Lorena could have just fallen down is right on point. I mean, she literally just could have
It was
fainted from heat exhaustion and stop that ball. It was just hit so softly. But yeah, the real Baldo line moment. So where Rasheed Wallace was nodding in approval from his very lush couch, I'm sure. So that keeps it scoreless. A few minutes later, though, Brazil's able to get on the board, pretty much on an action started from a Marta ball to Ludmila. And I wrote in my notes, great ball or greatest ball I've ever seen on that pass.
Unbelievable. It's unbelievable. I mean, let's do another cross-sport analogy. It's the Patrick Mahomes pass that's 50 yards down the field, but he's running to his right when he throws it. Like, for her to be able to turn, like she turns and in one motion hits the ball on a dime, exactly catching Ludmila in stride around a defender. It's mind-boggling to even try that. Like, you'll see players kind of try that pass and it's intercepted with no effort whatsoever from the defense. That was served on a platter to Ludmila to set up the goal.
Yeah, like kind of a hook on that ball worthy of the Masters. Like it would be.
Yes.
But that ball was just filthy. Around the defender was crazy. And then Jennifer, who had just come on at that point, she caps it off, puts Brazil up 1-0. And Brazil got to be feeling good at that point. But I think up until then, I think the chances were pretty balanced. I think up and down, matched to this point. I think we were all kind of waiting to see who was going to break through first.
Dude, I think you're spot on because I felt like it was still relatively even. And it's because Japan just has the ability on the counter and on the quick strike to ping together 4 or 5 passes and then create chances for themselves. And they continue to do that throughout the match. They were just having some hard luck and honestly just some lack of finishing touch in different opportunities.
Yeah, I think super on point. A 1-0 game, a lot of different types of 1-0 games, as you get later in the match. This one definitely felt like there was something coming, even though game kind of cooled off a little bit. And then, unfortunately, not our last handball of the night. We got one extremely late, and I think a little just as questionable maybe as the first one.
It's certainly unlucky. I mean, Yasmin leaves her feet. When you fall down, like everybody's natural reaction is to kind of pick yourself back up. And it feels like she's just trying to get her balance, and she moves her right hand, and then her hand hits the ball. I think this one, I'm just going to side more on it's unlucky, it's unfortunate, but when the ball's on the ground in the penalty area and you're on the ground as a defender and you reach out and hit it with your hand, it's like, okay, you almost kind of force the referee's hand, no pun intended, to call that penalty. And then Saki Kumagai steps up with one of the longest damn run-ups I've ever seen for a penalty. I don't know why she's standing outside the top of the circle of the 18. I thought it was interesting. I'm trying to think of other penalty kicks. I've seen speaking of Brazil, Roberto Carlos used to sometimes take these comically long run-ups to take free kicks. I don't know why Kumagai started her penalty that far back.
I think she was kind of hiding among some other Japanese players and just wanted to spring out from the group.
Or another player was going to run on and take it.
Yeah. I mean, credit to the captain for being a little savvy and just an excellent penalty. I mean, especially mentally coming off, seeing what happens to Tanaka early and you're down 1-0. This is it. This is I think the foul happens in the 88th or 89th minute. And then by the time the penalty kick is taken, they're at 92, 90. They're way, way deep in this match. Exactly. So a good amount of pressure there to essentially keep Japan alive, because if they lose this one, now it's 2 matches, no points, which was a very, very live outcome, as she's taking that very surprise run up.
Yeah, definitely. And, we've talked about it. I think Lorena in goal for Brazil, she can give you some nervy moments from time to time. I think largely she strikes me as a pretty good keeper. I do not claim to be a goalkeeping expert, however. I think she's pretty good. I mean, she did have a moment in the middle of the second half, I think it was, where she basically just passed the ball to Yui Hasegawa, but the Brazilian defense was able to kind of snuff it out. I think overall, I think she's handled herself pretty well. And with that in mind, I don't think you can blame that last goal on her. I know she's out. She's out of her area, essentially. But when that ball comes to Momoko Tanikawa, who is actually currently on loan to our old pals at FC Rosengard of the Damelsvenskan from her parent club, Bayern Munich. Tanikawa, just an incredible piece of skill and presence of mind to look up and hit that from deep for the winner. It was a total gut punch for Brazil. You could see as soon as Tanikawa hits it, everybody kind of looks, but there's one Brazilian defender who just immediately goes, like she could tell the exact angle that it was on. Perfect strike from Tanikawa.
Yeah, it's got to be devastating. I think we also saw Marta on the bench, absolutely gutted after this. Yeah. Brazil's tournament's not over.
Oh.
Japan's tournament's not over. Still a lot of ball to be played. I think looking ahead, though, you start to talk about some of these most exciting matchups. This match day 3 here coming up. Spain, Brazil.
Yeah.
How do we not lose our fucking minds watching 90 plus minutes of that? Brazil is on 3 points. They kind of need a result against Spain, unfortunately. They're one of those 8 teams who've got at least 3 points, but they're sitting at an even goal differential, and they're taking on the champs. So a bad loss there could put them in jeopardy of not advancing for sure. You know, we talked about Canada. They're definitely looming. They've got a better differential than Brazil. The only way Brazil probably feels confident, and they're playing a Spain team that's already clinched. So who knows what the lineups look like? Who knows where the intensity level is? But I would love to see Brazil kind of get something here against Spain and find their way into the knockout stage. And in the other matchup, Nigeria, Japan, we talked about it. Would love to see Nigeria put some together here, at least get on the board. Would love to see them get a result. But Japan in that same boat, one of 8 teams on 3 points. They've got an even goal differential, so they want a result, but they're in a little bit of a stronger position than Brazil.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to put it. I think if you're Japan and you get a draw with Nigeria, you're sitting on 4 points. You just got to hope Brazil doesn't beat Spain. I think if you're Spain, you might be hesitant. And it's not like you can rest that many players anyway with an 18-player roster. Right. I think if you're Spain, I think you want to go out there and take it to Brazil a little bit. I mean, you know, there's a lot of history in the way these nations view themselves as footballing operations. And I know Julia Belas-Trindade talked to us about how Brazil, they've been lacking in that. A bunch of dudes up top have been trying to hold back women's football for years and years. Hopefully there's enough people in that federation that can come to their senses, or people like Julia who are putting pressure on those people to say, oh, okay, so you're just going to go in there and just get cracked by Spain? That's what kind of operation you're running? And I don't doubt the players for a second, but hopefully the federation can look over at what Spain is doing and think, we should be able to do that. We're Brazil. I have no doubt that the players are going to be going into that match with that mindset. That was why I was hesitant. I know the stakes in Colombia and Canada, but I still, football brain is just like, yeah, but also Spain, Brazil. I mean, come on. We're talking about Spain and we're talking about Brazil. Like, I think that's the one I'm most excited to watch, with Colombia, Canada close second.
There we go. I mean, just the color clash too, Spain, Brazil. It's going to be just a beautiful mosaic of activity on the field there. And there's real stakes. So definitely excited about that. All right, man. Football's back on Wednesday. I feel like we pretty much covered match day 2, top to bottom. A lot of stakes here coming up. Anything else you want to hit before we get out of here?
I think I got one more thing. I didn't get to it during the USA discussion. I was at a neighborhood-friendly watering hole watching match day 2. TVs all across the bar. The place is packed. People are there specifically to watch women's football in the Olympics. It was extremely good vibes. The dude who runs the bar is from somewhere in the UK, from what I could tell. Didn't sound Scottish, but definitely somewhere in the UK. At any rate, we got USA, Germany on every single TV. And I said, hey, man, how about on that side one? Any interest in putting up France, Canada? And he was like, yes, mate, good. And then he ran over and he threw it on for me. And he was like, good taste. So that's my guy. Shout out to him. But the reason I bring all this up is when Lynn Williams checked on, the whole bar went nuts.
Wow.
Psyched for Lynn Williams to even come on. And then she scores the goal and the place explodes. So
Jeez, let's go.
The NWSL's all-time leading scorer seems like just a genuinely cool and nice person. You saw her in the Netflix documentary. Everybody obviously gets a piece of her personality. And Friendly's Samantha Muse's podcast for the women's game. It's just cool to have that kind of player who is like universally loved, and to see that player kind of come through the program that everybody can rally around. Is not the most important player on the side, but is an extremely valuable piece and could prove the difference in some of these matches. So I just thought I'll be honest, I did not expect an ovation for her coming on as a sub in a match where they're already winning 3-1. And when that happened, I was like, okay, that's badass. These people know ball. So that was very encouraging.
I'd love to hear that. And very professional finish, too, for the goal.
Fantastic.
You know, it was like, I should score here. This is a goal. All I've got to do is collect myself, get the ball where I want it, clean strike on it, figure out the placement. And it was just check, 4-1 USA. Exactly what you would expect from a professional like Lynn Williams. And it could be more of a role to play left in the tournament. So I don't know. I wouldn't be shocked if that's not the last score from Lynn Williams.
I believe we may hear more from her moving forward.
All right, man. I think we did it. This has been another episode of Into the Channel. Sincere thank you for watching, listening, following, liking, subscribing, chiming in, giving us nickname suggestions, or just plain hanging out with your boys. We really appreciate it. And remember to like if you liked and subscribe or follow Into the Channel, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to watch or listen. Leave us a review over at your favorite podcast app. Links to all of our socials in the show notes of this episode. And a big thank you to my co-host as well, Mr. Grant Angle, for riding alongside as we take these important steps on the way to claiming our gold medal as the Woso Bros podcast.
I think we're well on our way. And I don't think anybody's coming at us for that title. But if anybody were to do that, I would give them the same warning that I would give anybody who goes to play defense against Belle Biv de Gaulle. And that is, if I were you, I'd take precaution. All right. Thanks for rocking with us, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Poison.